How many times have you trusted someone, only to realize later that what you thought was love, friendship, or loyalty was nothing more than manipulation? It leaves you feeling used, hollow, and almost ashamed that you didn't see it coming, ashamed that you gave your heart or your trust so freely. And maybe the worst part isn't just the betrayal itself, but the way it makes you question everything. How can I ever trust again? How can I even trust myself if I couldn't see the signs? That's the wound that lingers. It eats away at your sense of safety. And it makes life feel like a maze where everyone could be wearing a mask. Carl Jung once said that the human psyche is full of masks, what he called a persona. We wear them to fit in, to be accepted, to look good in the eyes of others. There's nothing inherently wrong with a persona. It's part of being human. But the danger comes when someone uses their mask not as a bridge, but as a weapon. A charming smile can hide cold indifference. A confident tone can disguise insecurity. A promise whispered in your ear can actually be a chain tightening around your freedom. And you don't see it, not at first, because you want to believe. You want to belong. You want to feel loved. That's where the pain comes from. Because behind every mask there is always a shadow. Jung believed that the shadow holds the parts of ourselves we refuse to face. Anger, fear, greed, selfishness. Most of us try to hide it even from ourselves. But manipulators? They've mastered the art of hiding their shadow from everyone else while letting it control their actions in secret. And when you're caught in their orbit, you feel like you're giving, yet somehow you're always the one drained. You walk away from conversations feeling smaller. You second-guess yourself more. You start apologizing for things you didn't even do. That's how subtle manipulation works. It doesn't need chains. It makes you hand them over willingly. Imagine sitting across from someone who is smiling warmly, nodding at all the right moments. They look like a friend. They sound like a partner. But if you look closely, something doesn't add up. Maybe it's the way their eyes don't soften when they smile. Maybe it's a slight delay in their response, as if rehearsing their words. Maybe it's the way you feel afterward, like you've been emptied, like your energy has leaked out without explanation. Jung would say that's not an accident. That's your unconscious noticing the crack in the mask. Your body often knows before your mind does. And here's the promise. You don't need years of therapy or endless heartbreaks to finally recognize manipulation. There's a detail, a signal, that can reveal the truth in just 2 seconds if you learn to see it. Think of it like a slip in the mask, a flicker that betrays what's really behind. Once you know how to catch it, you'll never unsee it. You'll stop walking blindfolded across fragile rope bridges. You'll stop doubting your sanity every time someone twists your words. You'll step into clarity. But let's be honest, part of you is afraid to see, isn't it? Because if you strip away the mask, you might also strip away the comfort of the illusion. You might have to face the reality that someone you love isn't who you thought they were. That's why most people prefer to ignore the signs. It feels easier, safer, but ignoring doesn't protect you. It keeps you trapped. The question is, how do you actually do it? How do you see beyond the mask without wasting years figuring it out? How do you recognize, in just 2 seconds, whether someone is being real with you, or whether you're stepping into another carefully crafted trap? That's exactly what we're about to uncover. Because hidden inside Jung's ideas is a key so small, so subtle, that most people overlook it. Yet once you grasp it, you'll never fall for the same tricks again. It's not about memorizing 1,000 body language cues or turning into some kind of human lie detector. It's about learning to notice the one thing that can't be faked. The question is, are you ready to see it? Jung believed that much of our suffering comes from not understanding the masks we wear, or the ones others wear to deceive us. He called the mask the persona. It's the polished self we display to the world, the one that smiles even when we're exhausted, that says, "I'm fine," when we're not. That plays the role of the responsible worker, the loyal friend, the supportive partner. On its own, it isn't evil. It's part of survival. Society needs masks. But the danger comes when a persona becomes armor so thick that it hides not only the truth from others, but from ourselves. And lurking behind every mask is a shadow, everything we rejected, denied, or buried deep inside. Anger, fear, jealousy, greed, the parts we swear we don't have but secretly carry. Now imagine this at work. There's a colleague who seems perfect, always smiling, always complimenting, always stepping in to help. At first, you admire them, but slowly you start to notice patterns. They repeat your ideas in meetings, dressed up as their own. When something goes wrong, their fingers point in your direction, but never directly, always cloaked in sweet words like, "I just thought maybe you forgot." Their mask never slips in obvious ways, but your chest tightens after conversations. You start rehearsing what you'll say before you meet them, afraid of how your words might be twisted. That's not paranoia. That's your intuition catching the shadow peeking through the cracks. Have you ever been there? Trusted someone's kindness, only to feel their energy draining you day by day? Or perhaps you met a friend who always seemed supportive, but somehow you leave their presence questioning your worth. It feels like looking into a mirror that reflects your face, yet something about the reflection seems off, as if faint cracks spread across the glass, distorting what should be. Oh, Jung would say that's no coincidence. Those cracks are the shadow announcing itself, even when the persona tries to stay flawless. The most dangerous thing we can do is ignore those cracks. And yet, most of us do. Why? Because we crave belonging. Because it hurts less to believe in the mask than to confront the possibility that someone we trust might not be safe. So we explain away, they're just tired, or maybe I'm overreacting. But the body doesn't lie. Your stomach knots. Your chest feels heavy. Your breath shortens. Not because you're imagining things, but because you're sensing a mismatch. The words say one thing. The energy says another. This is where Jung's insight becomes not just theory, but survival. The mask and the shadow are always in tension, always leaking into one another. And when someone is manipulative, they may polish their persona to shine brighter than anyone else's, but no mask is perfect. At some point, even if only for a second it slips, a flicker of contempt crosses their face. A sharpness cuts into their tone. Their eyes go cold while their smile remains frozen. That is the truth moment, the second where the shadow pierces through and the mask can no longer hold. And here's the hard part. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. The mirror doesn't return to flawless glass. The cracks remain. You begin to realize that trust built on a mask is fragile, and what you need is vision strong enough to see through. So the real question is, what happens when that mask falls by accident? Even for just 1 second? How do you catch it? And what do you do when you do? That is where the real journey begins. Manipulators rarely reveal themselves in grand, obvious gestures. They slip through the cracks of daily life, showing who they really are in the smallest of details. Listen closely, and you'll notice how their tone of voice doesn't quite match their words. How a compliment sounds just a little too sharp around the edges. How reassurance is laced with subtle condescension. Watch their eyes. Do they hold your gaze with warmth, or do they dart away when truth gets too close? Pay attention to the dissonance between what they say and what they actually do. Promises made with conviction evaporate when action is required. Apologies flow easily, but the behavior never changes. These are the fingerprints of manipulation, left not in dramatic betrayals, but in the quiet erosion of trust. Think about relationships. A partner says, "I love you. I'd never hurt you." Yet their words are followed by weeks of silence, dismissive gestures, or cold indifference when you need them most. At work, a boss praises your dedication in meetings, but privately piles on unreasonable demands, expecting you to sacrifice your well-being to prove your loyalty. And friendships can be just as deceiving. Someone who constantly calls themselves your best friend, but subtly undermines you with gossip, or uses your vulnerabilities as weapons in moments of conflict. On the surface, everything looks fine, but deep inside, you feel a steady unease, as if you're always one step away from falling. Jung once said, "Everything we deny in ourselves, we project onto others, adapted to our daily struggles." It means this. Manipulators often accuse you of the very things they are guilty of. The dishonest friend will call you untrustworthy. The controlling partner will claim you're the one who's too demanding. The insecure boss will label you a threat. Why? Because they can't face their own shadow. So they dress it up, toss it onto your shoulders, and make you carry what was never yours. If you don't notice it happening, you begin to absorb it. You start believing their story about you, and slowly, you lose sight of who you really are. Imagine walking across a rope stretched high above the ground. Every step requires focus, balance, and trust that the rope will hold. Now imagine someone shaking that rope, smiling at you as if it's a game. That's what trusting a manipulator feels like. Walking a tightrope with no safety net. On the outside, they may look like they're guiding you, supporting you, even cheering you on. But underneath, every smile hides a hand that keeps the rope unsteady. The more you try to balance, the more exhausted you become, until you're convinced the problem is you, that maybe you're just not strong enough. But here's the deeper danger. It's not just about what they take from you on the surface. The real loss happens inside. Every time you ignore the red flags, a piece of your own inner compass dulls. You stop trusting your intuition. You question your worth. You begin to live in a constant loop of self-doubt, replaying their words, wondering if you're the problem. And the more you lose yourself, the easier it becomes for them to keep pulling the strings. That's the trap most people never see. It's not just the risk of betrayal. It's the slow erosion of your own identity. The danger doesn't end with losing trust in others. The true cost is losing trust in yourself. And that is exactly what keeps you trapped in the manipulator's game. But what if there were a way to break this loop? What if you could spot the crack in the mask, the tremor in the voice, the subtle shift in the eyes, before the rope beneath you starts to shake? What if, instead of doubting yourself, you could stand firmly on solid ground while the mask falls away on its own? The most dangerous part of manipulation is not the betrayal itself. It's what happens to you when you live too long without seeing it. At first, you just feel a little drained after every interaction. You tell yourself it's nothing, that maybe you're just tired. But over time, the drain becomes a hollowing. You pour your energy, your love, your loyalty into someone else's hands, only to realize those hands never give back. And piece by piece, you begin to lose yourself. It's not just trust that disappears, it's identity. You wake up one morning, and the person staring back at you in the mirror feels like a stranger. The spark in her eyes is gone, replaced by a dull heaviness. Your smile feels rehearsed, your voice sounds smaller, and even your posture has curled inward, as if you're folding it on yourself. You carry guilt like a second skin. Every conflict turns into a cycle of self-blame. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe it really is my fault. Maybe I should just try harder. And that guilt keeps you tied to the very person draining you, because you start to believe you don't deserve better. Manipulation thrives not by chaining your body, but by convincing your mind that you have no way out. It whispers that without them, you are nothing, that without their approval, you are unworthy. And when you buy into that lie, dependency takes root. You stay, even as the walls close in. The emptiness grows louder. You feel exhausted even when you haven't moved. You withdraw from friends because you're tired of explaining, tired of pretending everything is fine. Loneliness creeps in, and soon you begin to live on autopilot, mechanically going through the motions, but never truly present. It's as if time itself has stopped. The days blend together, lifeless and gray. You look at the clock and realize hours have passed, but nothing has changed. Jung would say this is the soul's alarm bell. When the clock of your inner life is frozen, it means you're no longer moving toward your own purpose. You're trapped in someone else's game. Picture it clearly. A beautiful clock hanging on the wall, ornate and golden. To anyone passing by, it looks perfect. But the hands don't move. The ticking has stopped. No matter how many times you glance at it, the time is always the same. That's what your life feels like when you're caught in manipulation. On the outside, everything seems fine. You still smile, you still work, you still play your role. But inside, your growth is paused, your energy frozen, your future stalled. You're living in someone else's rhythm, and your own heartbeat has been silenced. The tragedy is that most people don't even notice the clock has stopped. They're too busy trying to survive, too busy keeping the mask intact, too busy explaining away the unease that gnaws at them every night. But deep down, the truth presses harder with every passing day. This isn't living. This is existing in a prison disguised as safety. And yet, here's the turning point. Jung discovered that there's a way to break this cycle, a path back to yourself, a way to restart the clock. But it doesn't begin by confronting the manipulator. It begins with something far more powerful and far more terrifying, confronting what's inside of you. Jung called the path out of this prison the journey of individuation. It isn't about becoming perfect or building a mask so strong that no one can ever deceive you again. It's about becoming whole. The first step is recognition, daring to see the mask, both in others and in yourself. You begin to notice when words don't match actions, when smiles feel rehearsed, when your own persona is working overtime just to keep you liked. Instead of blaming yourself for missing the signs, you start to honor the fact that your intuition has been whispering all along. Recognition is the moment the fog clears and you realize the game isn't invisible anymore. But Jung didn't stop there. He taught that the shadow, the parts of yourself you denied, is not your enemy. It's your teacher. When you learn to acknowledge your fears, your anger, your need for control, they lose their power to manipulate you from the dark. Imagine holding up a lantern in a room you once avoided. At first, the sight is uncomfortable, even frightening. But slowly you realize these shadows are not monsters. They are pieces of you that need love, understanding, and boundaries. By integrating your shadow, you no longer project it blindly onto others. You no longer fall so easily into the traps of manipulators, because you've already faced those same patterns within yourself. Then comes conscious action. This is the moment you stop living on autopilot and begin responding with awareness. It's choosing to pause before reacting to a manipulative comment, breathing deeply and letting silence be your shield instead of rushing to defend yourself. It's picking up a notebook and writing down exactly what you feel instead of letting someone else define it for you. It's practicing the courage to say no without apology, even when your voice trembles. Each act may feel small, almost insignificant, but like a seed breaking through hard soil, these microactions are signs of new life. Think of a seed buried underground. For weeks it looks like nothing is happening. The soil is heavy, the pressure immense. Yet inside, the seed is stirring, splitting open, finding the courage to push upward toward light. That's what individuation feels like. Writing down your feelings, pausing instead of reacting, sitting in silence without rushing to fill it, saying not today when someone tries to pull you back into old patterns. On the surface, these acts may seem tiny, but beneath them is the force of transformation. One small crack in the soil, and a whole new life begins to rise. And as you practice, something beautiful happens. You begin to live with authenticity, not perfection, not endless people-pleasing, but authenticity. You learn to show up as you are, not as the mask you think the world wants. And in doing so, you leave behind a legacy far greater than survival. You leave a path for others to follow. Because when one person chooses authenticity over manipulation, silence over chaos, and wholeness over fragmentation, it gives others permission to do the same. But here's the truth. No journey of transformation comes without challenges. For every seed that dares to grow, there are storms, stones, and roots that threaten to choke it. Jung warned that even on the path of individuation, there are dangerous traps waiting to pull you back into the cycle. And unless you see them clearly, you risk falling into the very patterns you thought you had escaped. Because before you can live this integration fully, you must learn to recognize the hidden pitfalls that appear along the way. Every journey of transformation carries hidden traps, subtle dangers that can pull you back into the very patterns you thought you had left behind. Jung understood that the psyche resists change, and the ego will often disguise fear as wisdom. One of the first pitfalls is ego inflation. The moment you begin to see manipulation clearly, it's tempting to believe you now see everything, that you're beyond being fooled. But pride is just another mask, and the danger of ego inflation is that it blinds you to your own blind spots. The truth is, no one ever sees it all. Humility keeps your eyes open, arrogance shuts them fast. Another trap is isolation. After being manipulated, your instinct may be to retreat completely, to close yourself off so no one can hurt you again. At first, it feels safe. You don't risk betrayal if you never let anyone close. But isolation is a slow poison. Without connection, the soul withers. Healing doesn't come from hiding. It comes from learning how to engage with awareness, from stepping back into life without letting the past dictate your every move. Then there's the savior complex. Once you awaken to manipulation, you might feel an urge to rescue others from it. You see your friends trapped in toxic relationships, your colleagues being drained by controlling bosses, and you want to shout, "Can't you see it? Let me help you escape." But here's the danger. If you spend all your energy trying to fix others, you may neglect the work of healing yourself. True transformation isn't about saving everyone else. It's about becoming whole, so your very presence becomes a quiet light, not a frantic rescue mission. Regression is another curve in the labyrinth. Change is uncomfortable, and when fear tightens its grip, the old patterns can feel strangely comforting. You might catch yourself slipping back into people-pleasing, silencing your voice, or doubting your worth, just because it feels familiar. Regression doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. But recognizing it matters, because every time you return to an old pattern with awareness, you strengthen your ability to move beyond it. And then there's comparison. A trap as ancient as philosophy itself. Nietzsche once wrote that the human being must overcome everything alone, as if solitude were the only path to greatness. Eckhart, on the other hand, taught that surrender opens space for God, that transformation happens not in isolation, but in union with something greater. Both perspectives echo in our souls, but comparison turns them into shackles. The truth is, your journey will never look exactly like anyone else's. Comparing your pace, your progress, or your struggles to another's will only lead you deeper into the maze. Think of this journey as a labyrinth. Each twist and turn represents one of these traps. Pride, isolation, saviorhood, regression, comparison. Walk blindly, and you may find yourself circling endlessly, convinced you're moving forward while you're really looping back. But if you walk with awareness, pausing, noticing, choosing, you begin to see the map. The labyrinth stops being a prison and becomes a path. And here's where everything shifts. Because when you learn to walk past these traps without falling in, when you move through the labyrinth with your eyes open and your heart steady, something extraordinary begins to happen. Here we arrive at the turning point, the moment of rebirth. Everything that once felt broken, confusing, and heavy begins to take on a new shape. The persona you worn for so long, carefully polished to please others, no longer needs to trap you. The shadow you feared, filled with anger, grief, and unmet needs, no longer has to haunt you. When mask and shadow finally meet, when the parts you denied are welcomed into the light, something extraordinary happens. You become whole. Not flawless, not untouchable, but real, and in that realness, freedom is born. Think back to the mirror you've been carrying. For years it only showed you fragments, cracks from betrayal, fractures from self-doubt, sharp edges from every manipulation you endured. You try to glue it together, desperate to restore a flawless surface, ashamed of every scar. But now the light shifts. Instead of brokenness, you see beauty. The shattered mirror transforms into stained glass. Each crack becomes a channel for color, each fracture a passage for light. What once felt like damage now reveals design. What once felt like loss becomes a doorway to grace. And then comes silence. But this silence no longer feels like emptiness. It feels alive. Not loneliness, but peace. A fertile ground where new life begins. It's the kind of silence where you no longer rush to fill the space with apologies, with excuses, with masks. You simply breathe. You rest. You exist. And for the first time in so long, that is enough. This is what Jung meant by integration. Not rejecting your shadow, not clinging desperately to your mask, but weaving them together into something whole. When you stop fearing your darkness, it loses its power. When you stop hiding behind your persona, it crumbles away. What remains is a self strong enough to stand in truth, vulnerable enough to love, and free enough to see others clearly. Freedom, you realize, was never about cutting yourself off from the world or building walls so high that no one could touch you. Real freedom is the ability to see with clarity, to live without disguise, to trust yourself again. It's no longer about fear and manipulation, but about standing so firmly in your own center that no mask, yours or anyone else's, can shake your peace. And so the final truth emerges, simple and undeniable. Freedom begins the moment you see beyond the mask. If this spoke to you, don't let it slip away. Anchor it. Make it yours. Write it into your story right now by commenting, "I choose my peace." Let those words be your declaration, your seed breaking through the soil of silence. And if your heart longs to go deeper, I prepared another video to guide you into the next step: how to embrace your shadow without fear and discover the strength hidden in what you once rejected. Because this isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your freedom.